Welcome to the Daily Dose of Derm podcast, your go-to podcast for all things dermatology. I'm Dr. Basir Tareen, a board-certified dermatologist and the founder of Tareen Dermatology. Join us as we dive into the fascinating world of skincare, beauty, dermatologic treatment, and how to enter the world of derm. Whether you're a skincare enthusiast or an aspiring medical professional, this podcast is your daily dose of knowledge and inspiration. Get ready to uncover the secrets to healthy skin and discover how to make a meaningful impact in the field.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Dose of Derm. I am your host, Shihab Adam, and today we are beginning Series 2 of our podcast, speaking with professionals on how they got to where they are today. Today, I'm sitting with Dr. Basir Tareen. He is a board-certified urologist and the CEO here at Tareen Dermatology. Basir, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, so as Shihab said, I'm a urologist, but I wear a couple different hats. I actually grew up in a very small town called Cavalier, North Dakota. It was a town of 1,500 people. And a lot of people will be like, well, how'd you end up in North Dakota? And, Or the other thing I hear people say is, you're the first person I've ever met from North Dakota. And especially saw that when I went interviewing for residencies and things. But my dad was a small town surgeon. He was the only surgeon in the county. And he did his training in Pakistan and then emigrated to England and then eventually to the U.S., and so initially came to the small town because they needed doctors, and he thought he would stay for a few years and then eventually move on somewhere else, and ended up staying there for 30 years. So that's where I was born. That's where we have 4 siblings, 4 total in my family. And so we were born and raised there, and it was a great place to grow up. And so I got to kind of see rural medicine firsthand.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, kind of growing up in that sort of setting, what initially drew you into the field of medicine as a potential career path for you?
Yeah, I think for many of us, often our parents are our role models, right? So if my dad was, sort of my role model, and I got to see firsthand, we'd go to the grocery store. It was a small town, right? So everyone would be like, oh, doc, thank you, or I feel so much better, or like people start showing you your their scars in the middle of the grocery store. And so that was, sort of my first sort of exposure to medicine. I was like, wow, you really get to help people and make people happy. And despite the fact that my dad was a general surgeon, he actually had a pretty good lifestyle. I mean, yes, he was on call, but he had a very good work-life balance. And so for me, I think I always knew I was going to be a doctor. Just kind of grew up thinking that, even from the time I was a little kid, and that was always the plan.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, considering the demanding nature of medical training, the practice itself, what factors kind of ultimately convinced you that this was worth the commitment and pursuit?
Yeah. It's funny. A lot of times people sort of outside of medicine say, well, gosh, it's so much work. And I guess sometimes you don't really know anything different. I always sort of worked hard and always knew that I had to put the time in. And one of the things that I got to do that a lot of people probably didn't was, starting the time that I was in high school, a lot of people have their high school jobs, and I mowed lawns and I worked at the local Dairy Queen too. But my coolest job was may have been because of my dad, a little nepotism. I got a job, being the janitor in the operating room. So I got to, between cases, I was the one that got to scrub the floors and wipe down all the surfaces and sanitize things. And of course, the best part of that job was I was always kind of, looking over the drape, kind of seeing what's going on. And as I got older, I got to, do more, doing more and more. And so it's kind of like, it was like, that is so cool. Like, I can't wait. It was like, can't wait till I get to do that. It's almost like some people go and watch like a sports game and they're like, I want to be the quarterback. And for me, I was like, well, I want to be the surgeon. Like it was, there was no question that that's what I wanted to do.
Absolutely. Overall, how do you perceive the role of medicine in society today, and what impact did that have on your own perception to, decide to pursue a career in the field?
Yeah, I think in general, yes, medicine, we always, you hang around enough in the surgeon's lounge, you hear a lot of the old doctors say, oh, medicine has changed. And yes, it has changed, but as much as it's changed, it's also stayed the same. I mean, as much as, yes, medicine in some ways is very different than when my dad started. Now we have robotic surgery and everything's on the computer and there's no paper charts and there's a million more regulations. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, medicine is really just me in the room with the patient trying to solve their problem, or me in the operating room trying to fix whatever's wrong with them. And I think that core has never really changed, and that's sort of the beauty of medicine. And yes, there's lots of things that otherwise have changed in and around medicine, but when it comes down to it, a person has a problem, the doctor is the one that's going to try to fix it. And that core will probably hopefully always be there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So medical school, you ended up going to the University of North Dakota. What ultimately influenced your decision to go there as opposed to maybe other institutions?
Yeah, kind of a funny story. My wife and I joke about this. So my wife is a dermatologist, as many people know. And when we talk about our strategies for applying for med school, we had slightly differing strategies. My wife, who was clearly a much better student, had probably much better test scores than me. She applied to every single med school in the country. That was just her nature. She's like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to get in, and applied to every single school. And I applied to one. And,
one and done.
Right. And it wasn't that I was cocky or anything. It was just like my rationale was like, well, that's where I want to go. I'm a resident of North Dakota. It's my best chance of getting in. So I'm just going to apply to that one school. And, luckily it worked out very well.
There we go.
I got in and got a full tuition scholarship for the first year. So it was kind of a no-brainer. And UND was an awesome med school. So it was a great choice.
Were there any unique aspects about that program that you really appreciated, really liked, or maybe even drew you to make that decision even more?
Yeah. So UND is a bit of a unique med school. It's very small. So my graduating class, I think, had 55 or 56 students. Okay. So that's a pretty small med school class. Everybody becomes kind of like family. And it's very much focused on rural medicine just because of the nature of North Dakota. So as part of your third and fourth year experiences, you go spend time in rural clinics. And so I picked Cavalier, my hometown. So I got to spend 2 months working, in our small town. Of course, I knew all the doctors, and I got to scrub surgeries with my dad, which was super fun. I mean, that was, a whole nother level. I mean, yes, I'd worked in high school cleaning the operating room and mopping floors, but this is different now. It's like, hey, here I am, like a legit med student. I can scrub in, I can assist with surgery, and it was just it was a great group of people. So even some of my best friends today I met in med school and still keep in touch with today. So it was a great program, great relationships, very hands-on. You go to some big university programs and you're sort of third and fourth in line to do anything. You've got fellows and residents, and in North Dakota the med students are kind of they get all the attention because there's not that many of us and there's not a bunch of competition. So
Gotcha. Okay. Going back to medical school and the application process itself, could you elaborate a little bit on the MD route for the application, what that kind of entails?
Yeah, I think in general it's still pretty similar today, with the difference being we actually had to hand type out applications, and so it was a little bit of a pain in the butt to do applications. I can still remember my typewriter at home and doing that. Now man. I think everything is automated. You do one application, you can hit send and send it to 100 schools, but same process. Personal statements, MCAT scores. The interviews were all in person. I think over the since COVID, many of those have moved to Zoom. I still remember the morning of my interview, got up super early. The interview was in Grand Forks, and I was staying in Cavalier, and woke up at 6 a.m. and my mom made me a hamburger because I was like, I want to eat a big breakfast. So my mom made me a hamburger for breakfast. I drove with her there, and I remember, wearing the suit and, going through the interview process. Luckily, it all worked out.
There we go. No, that's awesome. You're in medical school, you're a student, and you're getting to the point where you're deciding on what specialty you really want to focus on. Was it your dad, growing up with your dad's experience and all that, did that really influence your decision to pursue urology? Were there other specialties you were considering at the time?
It's a great question. A lot of people will ask that, like, when we go to a dinner party, first of all, everyone wants to talk to my wife because dermatology, everyone's right. got something on their skin, or they want to talk about Botox, and they'll be like, oh, what do you do? And I'll be like, oh, I'm a urologist. And then everyone kind of stops, and then they don't really know what to say. They don't want to get too deep into whatever their urologic problem might be. Right. But it's interesting. So I went to med school thinking I'm going to be a surgeon. I was convinced I was going to be a general surgeon like my dad. But once I got to med school and went to the big city of Fargo, I realized that the lifestyle for general surgery wasn't quite as good as my dad had it. There was a lot of longer hours, lots of call in the middle of the night. But I still knew, I really wanted to do, one of the things you have to decide in med school is I think there's kind of two sort of big questions is, do you want to work with people, or do you want to sit in, or not work with patients? And, if you don't want to work with patients, you do radiology or you do pathology. If you want to work with patients, then the next question is, do you want to do surgery or you want to do procedures? And so for me, I knew it was going to be surgery. And so then I started looking at surgical subspecialties. And one of my good friends, Rachel Miller, who's a very well-known now pediatric gynecologist here in the Twin Cities, one day she just said, you know what, Basir? She's like, you should do urology. I was like, urology? She goes, yeah. She goes, they're all really happy. You walk in, they get to do really cool surgeries. They're doing nephrectomies and things. They make a big mess everywhere. She's like, you're not the cleanest person, She's like, there's always water everywhere when they're like operating. I was like, never thought about that. So one day I had some free time and I just kind of went in, on one of my rotations, I, got scrubbed in and went into the operating room, just kind of randomly, knocked on the urology guy's door, so to speak, and went in and said, hey, I'm a med student thinking about surgery. Do you mind if I scrub with you guys? And there was 2 urologists, and they were like, yeah, for sure. They're like, come on in, And so I picked their brain for about an hour, and they were just told me all about urology. And one of the guys there, Dr. Tom Noah, said, yeah, he was one of the younger guys there at the time, and said, yeah, I trained in this great program in Akron. You should think about it, And, one thing led to another. I went and did a rotation in Akron and just kind of fell in love with urology, the field, the guys, everything about it was just a really good fit.
Did they not specifically have a urology?
Yeah. So that was one of the challenges. A small med school, we didn't have a urology department. Typically, if you wanted to do a subspecialty like ENT or urology at UND, you had to kind of make your way through the surgery program and get the backing of the surgery chair. But the best thing for me was I just said, well, since we don't have a department, I better go learn, and do some rotations. So I did a rotation in North Carolina in Chapel Hill in urology. I did an Akron rotation. So that kind of opened up the world a little bit, right? So finally I was like, wow, I get to see what a real program looks like with a residency director and residents. It doesn't, just because you go to a program that doesn't have your specialty, that doesn't mean you can't do that. You just have to go out and sort of find your way. So I did that.
Going into your overall residency experience, could you elaborate a little bit on that? And what were some ultimately really good lessons you learned during that time and how you approach patient care now?
Yeah. So residency was awesome. And I tell all the, the gap year students that we work with, here at the derm practice, I always tell them, a lot of people go into whether it's med school or residency thinking like, oh, I just got to get through this. And I always tell them, enjoy the journey, because the journey is really fun. And the days are long, but the years go by really quickly. And, residency was an awesome time because, yes, you went through, 4 years of med school where you learned all the information, but residency, you're actually doing what you're going to be doing, right? So, and, every day you're learning something new, and you only have this, it sounds crazy, but you only have 5 years to really learn to do surgery, right? When you're done, you're going to be there operating on a person, and it's your name on the chart, and it's suddenly it's like, you're the one that's in charge of this patient, and whether it's removing their cancer or their kidney stone. It's a bonding experience. One of the things that makes life really fun is when you go through an experience that's intense with people that you care about. So you really get to be close with your co-residents. And my co-resident, Mark Mimo, is a successful urologist in Youngstown, Ohio, and he and I still talk regularly. And when we see each other, or your co-residents at national meetings, you have this instant bond. It's like probably similar to people who went through the army together or something like that. You just have this, you went through this intense experience, and you'll always sort of have that, or like a college roommate. So, but yeah, every day you were learning, and then, the way the residency works, you get to do more and more complicated stuff. So you start off in urology, the first year you're doing, a lot of rounding on the floor, taking care of patients. And then, year 2, suddenly you get to go in and, do kidney stone cases with scopes, and you're like, oh, this is cool. And, by the time you're a senior resident, you're actually doing the big cases. And my residency was really interesting because I trained at a time when robotics was just becoming, the thing. Wow. And so I got to be there during the transition from really big open cases to, doing robotic surgery. So it was really kind of a fun time to be there and be in training and sort of be part of that.
At that time, what was the perception of that? Did you guys really believe that, it was attainable at the time?
Yeah.
Right? Implementing robotics and surgeries?
It's a great question. And, I think with any technology, everything goes through phases, right? And I think, when a new technology comes out, there's certain people that embrace it and they sort of gravitate towards it quicker, and they're more of the pioneers. And you always have that subset of people who are the naysayers, who are like, oh, this robot thing, this is a fad, this is going to go away. And over time, the truth always washes out. There was definitely a big contingency of urologists who were saying, oh, this is, open surgery is so much better. And for years they would try to talk everybody into it. And you look back now and you kind of laugh, because almost every prostate is done robotically. Almost all our surgeries are done robotically. And it was a truly better technology. I mean, it's not that you can't do the same thing, by making a big incision, but why would you? If you can do everything through a small incision with less blood loss and much better visualization. And so I think, at the end of the day, whether it's the internet, the cell phone, Bitcoin, eventually technology eventually, wins out. If it's a good technology that makes things easier and better, it will always win out. And, you had the same thing when the iPhone came out. A lot of people were like, "Oh, this is, why would I pay $500 for this device? I can get a little Nokia flip phone for $30."
That's everything you need, right?
And the robot was the same way. And now, it's not. We don't even call it robotic surgery. We just call it surgery.
Gotcha. Super interesting. Yeah, thank you for that. Your time during residency. Did you ever struggle finding balance with just overall your responsibilities in the clinical setting, your academic pursuits, and just your overall well-being? Did you ever struggle with that as a resident?
Yeah, great question. It's funny. I look back now and I'm like, gosh, my life was pretty simple back then. No kids, wasn't married. One little condo. Of course now we have 5 kids and a lot of stuff going on. But I think if you set your habits early, right? If you as a college student, if you're busy doing lots of activities and sports, that you have to compartmentalize. You have to be like, this is my time to study. This is my time to do sports. And, the same thing, like, when you go through med school, you have to compartmentalize your time. And so I think if you've done that throughout your life, residency is just an extension of that. The one thing about residency is you're a little bit more of a grown-up. So you have an income, you get a salary and, I bought a little condo, so I had a mortgage. So there was a lot of adult things to kind of figure out. But ultimately, when I started, they passed the 80-hour work week rule, which, prior to that, people would spend 120 hours a week in residency. And so they passed the 80-hour limit. And, it sounds crazy now for, when you say for 80 hours, man, the normal work week is 40. But there's a lot of time in the day. Even with the 80-hour work week, your only responsibility really for me at the time was to learn to be a urologist. That was my main responsibility. And I knew as long as I made that the focus, but then obviously you take some time to exercise every day and do those things, and of course you're always going to have the bad days, and that's where having a good group of co-residents, they're really like your therapist. They're like your best friend. You call your buddy every day and be like, oh, you won't believe what happened today. So and so attending yelled at me for this or that, and so you rely on your friends, all of those types of things to get through it. But it was at the end of the day, and maybe some of this is post-revisionist, you look back with fondness on it, but it was really an awesome time. It was a lot of fun.
No, that's awesome. Did you have any sort of rude awakenings in terms of the way in which you thought you needed to practice, your overall clinical skills, decision-making abilities? Were there anything that really took you by surprise?
All of us that go through this will have rude awakenings throughout our life. And I think for me, one of the big ones, so my second year as a urology resident, we take an annual exam. It's called the in-service exam. It's like your big test for the year. And, throughout my life, I'd always, for the most part, done pretty well on tests. I got into med school, I got into urology. And I just finished my general surgery year and kind of floating high. And, my studying probably went by the wayside. I probably was, like, oh, I'll do fine. I always do pretty good on, do pretty well on tests. So we take the in-service exam. This is my second year of 5. And I get the score back and it just bombed it, like terrible, like second percentile in the country. And I was just devastated. Program director, who I love, is one of my mentors to this day, Dr. Nazarella, calls me into his office and he's like, this is not acceptable. You got to get your act together, and it was just like this big awakening, right? I was like, oh my gosh, like, I might not make this here. I gotta buckle up. So that was a really kind of a rude awakening, but in some ways, those bad experiences make you a lot stronger, and at the time it was like, the worst thing in the world. You couldn't sleep, you couldn't eat for a while. But then I said, well, you have 2 choices, right? You're either gonna, let this sort of destroy you and be the beginning of the end, or you're going to, use this, right? So I started studying like crazy. I made note cards, and some of the attendings would tease me like, oh, there's Basir with his note cards walking around and, memorizing stuff. And, but the next year, I got a 98 percentile. And so it was good motivation, but that was definitely a bit of a rude awakening.
That was the call, yeah, for sure. So moving forward, you're a practicing urologist. When you think about it, are there any aspects of the profession itself now that you find to be the most fulfilling for you? Do you have any memorable patient stories that you can really highlights that for you?
Well, there's so many things to me still, and we'll talk a little bit about this, I'm sure, is like, at this point in my career, I'm sort of tailored back on urology a little bit, and and doing a lot with my, some of my other businesses. But the thing that to this day that I love most about surgery in general, whether it's urology or surgery, is when it's time to do surgery, everything else gets put on pause. And it's almost like this, you scrub in, you put on your gown, and in this, in sterile technique, nobody's allowed to touch you. And it's almost kind of metaphoric too. Like nobody can touch you. The phone is off. There's no text. There's no phone. And you're really just focused on, the patient and what you're doing. I sort of still love that. It's kind of this escape almost, right? Even though you're doing this super high level thing that requires years of training, you're kind of escaping from the rest of the world. And, it doesn't matter what else is going on in your life. And, when our kids were little, maybe the baby was bothering you all night or whatever it is that's going terrible, everything gets put on pause and you get to just take a break and focus intensely on doing this operation. And that part is still what I really love. And there's so many good patient stories. I did a fellowship after residency in oncology. So I have a lot of cancer patients that are so thankful. In urology, one of the beauties of our field is we get to have continuity of care. So every year I get to see back the same patients for their annual follow-ups. And one of the nice things about urology is we can cure a lot of the cancers that we treat. And so it's really fun to see those patients back year after year. And then you hear about how their kids are growing up and now they have grandkids. And, some of these patients you see for 15 or 20 years or more. And so, we all have our group of favorite patients that come in and they bring us treats, and, you almost grow up with them. I have so many patients now that'll be like, oh, I remember when you had to, move my clinic appointment because your daughter was being born. And so then every year they ask me like, oh, how's your daughter? Oh, she must be, how old is your daughter now? And so we have a lot of that.
Just a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah.
So sort of on the flip side, what are some of the challenges and overall downsides in urology? What are some things that kind of bug you?
Yeah. So I think all of us in medicine, there's several things that, are sort of the bane of our existence. I think the paperwork, you spend so much of your time. Sometimes I walk into the doctor's lounge and I just see every doctor sort of peered over the computer typing. And I think to myself, I'm like, so this is medicine, right? We're all just sitting there, typing in because we need to, document this and that. And there's so much regulation and compliance and all of that requires us to spend so much time on the computer. And so if I could wave a magic wand and, get back to just, you in the room with the patient or doing the operation and let the doctors do that, I think that would be, really good. Obviously for most of our specialties, call is tough. I think, waking up in the middle of the night, no matter, who you are at some point in your life, waking up at 2:00 in the morning to go in the hospital is just disruptive, it's just hard. And I think that's a tough thing. And, but overall the joy you get from the good stuff, far outweighs. And we all have to pay a price, and every job has things that you don't love about it. And, for us, those are
navigate through it. Yeah, for sure. What is your current practice like? Like, what's your day-to-day look like usually?
Yeah. So, about a year and a half ago, I cut back on urology. I went down to about 2 days a week. And one of the reasons was over the years, I have a number of sort of business interests. As I help my wife start the derm practice, but I've always really had a passion for business and particularly real estate. And so early in my physician career, I would make friends with people in real estate and make small little investments in their real estate projects, and always really enjoyed that and thought that one day when I was able to, that I would do more of that. So about a year and a half ago, I launched a development company called Tareen Development Partners, and we've grown, very nicely over the last couple of years. And so I spend probably the majority of my time doing things with the real estate development company, and about a day and a half to 2 days a week of urology, which it's a really nice balance. And I find I'm enjoying urology more than ever because it's like sometimes when you're in the grind of it and you have to slug through 60 hours and you're on call, sometimes that starts to take a little bit of that joy away. And, sometimes having a day to do real estate and the next day you get to go see patients, it's just kind of this, reset, and it's this fresh approach. And I would say at this point, even though I'm not working nearly as much in urology, I'm enjoying it as much as ever.
Absolutely. So for someone who, wants to do the same thing as you, have your foot in, a couple of different industries, do you have any pieces of advice on, just overall balancing that?
Yeah. I think the one thing I would tell young people is there's nothing that's a permanent decision that you have to make in a career. And I know so many doctors that are my age, so I'm, 47 now, and there's, many people that started off on one path, even within medicine, and they do different things. They may decide to go do a sub-fellowship, or they may decide that they want to do more admin, or they may want to. So, I think medicine does allow you flexibility, and, I think that's the beauty of it, is you can do other things. And I know plenty of physicians who then become entrepreneurs, or they learn, something very specific, and, they take that knowledge and they'll develop a software company. And so there are plenty of other things that you can do with your medical degree and your training. So just because you decide, I'm going to be a urologist or a general surgeon, doesn't mean that that's what you're going to do every day for the rest of your life. Medicine, fortunately, it gives us the flexibility to, once you're established in your career and you are financially at a point where you can then branch off and do other things, or take some chances and start other businesses. I think you can always do that. So don't feel like, gosh, whatever I decide, I have to do this every day till I'm 70 years old. That's not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of circling back, back into your guys' dermatology practice. If you could just kind of overall explain kind of your role, especially in the beginning stages of starting this practice, and overall, what's it like having, a wife who's also a doctor?
Yeah.
What's that dynamic like?
Yeah. So about, 12 years ago, my wife was working for a large dermatology group, and was definitely happy, but often would say, gosh, I wonder if I would love to do things like this, or wish I could do it this way. And I always sort of liked the business side of things. And I said to her, why don't you just start your own practice? And she was like, oh, that seems like a lot of work. I don't know if I want to do that. And I was like, no, it'd be great. I'm like, I'll help you out. I'll do the business stuff. You just see the patients. And so that's how Tareen Dermatology started. A very small little office. It was Mohiba, and, we hired the first 2 employees. And during those times, that was probably a time in my life where I was spending as much or more time with the derm practice than anything else, because it was like every single person we hired, that was me. And it was a lot of work sort of getting things built up. And as we grew, it got to a point, fortunately, even though I, would sort of call myself the CEO, we got to a point where we had so many great people that we hired, so many great leaders, a CFO and a HR director, where now all of that, luckily, everybody is just doing such a good job where I can just kind of sit in and make the big decisions, I don't have to be involved with sort of the daily grind of hiring every receptionist or every medical assistant. And as far as the balance goes, I think for as busy as we are, we're very lucky that we have a pretty good work-life balance. So as many of you know, we have 5 kids, and we're very involved with their lives. We try to do daily drop-offs and pickups. And I think one of the things I try to tell this to young physicians, I think a lot of people don't understand this till later in life, is your most valuable thing, it's not money, and it's your time. It's the only thing that's really finite. You can always make more money, but you can't make more time. You have to figure out how you want to spend your time. And, if you are a physician and you make enough money, I say, outsource the things that you don't want to do. You can have somebody do your laundry, and you can have somebody help with some of the things that, maybe don't make you happy. So, and you're just trading that to spend more time with your family. So we're very lucky. We have, my parents live close by, and we have a great nanny who we've had for several years, who can help with some of the day-to-day stuff. And we can enjoy, when we're not working, we're with our children. And so to me, I think you just have to figure out how can you create that work-life balance, and there's definitely a way to do it, but you have to offload the stuff that you don't want to do, and sometimes that involves hiring a cleaning lady, and it's like you have to ask yourself, how do you want to spend your time? There's people that are better at doing certain things, so do the things that you enjoy.
That's awesome. And that's amazing. Yeah. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out today's conversation. Thank you so much for being here, Basir. Absolute utmost gratitude for you and everything that you do for our staff here at Tareen. We absolutely love you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for our listeners who are tuning in. We hope you'll join us again. Until then, stay curious and stay inspired. I'm Shihab Adam, and this is the Daily Dose of Derm.